Good afternoon, and thank you for attending our latest webinar in the series. Today we look to address the fears surrounding security in the cloud. I'm Gareth Workman, and I'm a technical architect, and I specialise in networking, virtualization, security and server technologies, and have been deploying cloud solutions for a number of years. I'm joined by my colleague Matt Holland. Matt is a solution architect and is a certified information security manager. Matt also sits on the board of the Charities Security Forum, which provides information security mentoring and advice to a number of charities. Joining us today is Gerry O'Neill. Gerry is the Vice President of the UK and Ireland Chapter of the Cloud Security Alliance, whose mission is to promote the use of best practices for providing security assurance within cloud computing. Today we will discuss the hot security topics surrounding cloud, adding context to both the terminology and how to remedy or treat the associated risks. We'll be running polls throughout the webinar, so please feel free to respond and let us know your opinions. We will also be accepting questions throughout, so if you have anything you'd like to ask, time permitting, we will try to respond towards the end of the webinar. So our first poll will appear on the screen in just a moment, so please feel free to vote. If you have not been using cloud to date, what is your main reason? Is it the perceived risk associated with cloud that has hindered adoption? Is it simply not cost-effective compared to a traditional on-premise or a hosted solution? Are functional requirements not met by current cloud offerings? Or are regulatory restrictions blocking any uptake of cloud services? Or are you ready using cloud? The first topic today is residency and how that affects security within a cloud environment. The very nature of cloud means it can be often difficult to pinpoint exactly where your data may reside, not only at rest, but also in transit. The responsibility resides with you, the consumer, to understand and verify with the cloud supplier where your data will be stored and processed. One of the issues of using cloud is probably you won't know exactly where your data is hosted. In fact, you might not even know which country your data will be stored in. In many cases, this can pose a problem. Due to compliance and privacy laws, locality of data is of the utmost importance. For example, in many EU countries, certain types of data cannot leave the borders of a country because of potentially sensitive information. In addition to the issue of local laws, there's also the question of jurisdiction when an investigation occurs. Therefore, a secure cloud model must be capable of providing the location of data to the customer. So how do I go about addressing the risk? First and foremost, classify your data. Understand what laws or compliance the data is subject to, and subsequently set out your requirements with regard to storage and processing. Depending on data classification, look for suppliers who can offer services to keep your data in a particular jurisdiction. For example, Amazon EC2 provides zones and regions to allow you to place your data in the appropriate global location. If not totally clear, ask providers if they're willing to commit to storing and processing data in specific jurisdictions and whether they will make a contractual commitment to obey local privacy requirements on behalf of you, their customer. The next topic for discussion is regulatory compliance, which ensures you comply with any applicable laws when utilizing a cloud service and understand exactly what laws are applicable to you and your data. The data controller or the consumer of the service has the responsibility for security and the integrity of their data. Therefore, the consumer must ensure the cloud provider is subject to any external auditing or possess the necessary security accreditations. The issues caused by non-compliance range from fines to damage of reputation which will affect customer perception or even to the point where your business cannot operate. One such case occurred where an employee bypassed the internal procurement procedures of their organization and started to store personal information within Salesforce, which in turn breached the law which did not allow personal data of their clients to leave the country. Subsequently, the company were forced to stop using the service and ensure that all data was purged, otherwise legal proceedings would be taken against them. As before with residency, you need to classify your data. Understand what laws or compliance the data is subject to, and therefore set out your requirements which must be met to remain compliant. Evaluate any cloud service against your compliance requirements. Ensure that contracts and service level agreements provide adequate protection to ensure you remain compliant in a cloud environment. Complete regular audits and ensure your cloud solution can provide you with the mechanisms to require both internal and or external audits. Moving on to recovery. Data recovery is critical for a business function. Knowing recovery is built into a service at the level of confidence in knowing that data can be recovered in the event of corruption or disaster. It is also key to understand how quickly service can be operational again after an incident. Issues associated with data recovery include service outages which affect business function and damages reputation, and data loss if inappropriate resiliency mechanisms have been used by the supplier. So what are the questions you should be asking a supplier? Is there both data and infrastructure replication in place? Is replication across one or multiple sites? How is recovery achieved and how quickly? Can the supplier provide evidence of regular successful testing? And what levels of recovery are available? Is it to the last committed change, the last hour, or the last day? Review SLAs to understand recovery as addressed from a contractual perspective. SLAs are nearly always monetary based, but ensure there's a commitment within the contract that your data can be restored regardless of failure. Monetary refunds won't help in the event of lost data. The use of strong encryption screens to protect your data is recommended to protect against accidental leakage of information. Therefore, confirm with the supplier that your data is stored in a secure fashion and that is encrypted and logically separated from other customers using appropriately secure mechanisms. Moving on to vulnerabilities and how they relate to cloud. Given its very nature, cloud is as vulnerable as any internet-connected system, so it is up to the supplier to ensure they have the appropriate security mechanisms in place, but you as a consumer must verify that the security mechanisms are sufficient to satisfy the business need. Vulnerabilities are widespread, but for the purposes of the webinar, I'm going to focus on the infrastructure as a service and what vulnerabilities the service model is open to. Infrastructure as a service builds upon the concept of virtualization and is one of the main components of any cloud, but this in itself poses major security risks. Ensuring that different instances running on the same physical machine are isolated from each other is a major task of virtualization. The other issue is the control of administrator access on the host and guest operating systems. To date, many bugs have been reported in all popular hypervisors. Any hypervisor should be root secure, meaning that no privilege within the virtualized guest environment permits interface with the host system. Some vulnerabilities have been found in all virtualization software, which can be exploited by malicious local users to bypass certain security restrictions or gain privileges. Remember, on a public infrastructure service platform, anyone can start a virtual machine and attempt to compromise the hypervisor and surrounding virtual machines. So vulnerabilities can lead to a number of issues, including the loss of confidentiality, the loss of data, targeted attacks that can affect the integrity of your data, perhaps without even you knowing. A threat could also affect the availability of your service, taking it offline, therefore not available for business function. And damage to business reputation, which we have all seen the high-profile attacks and how they have badly affected Sony. So how do I mitigate against such scenarios? In the same manner as deploying any other internet-connected system, ensure security is built into the solution from the outset and not an afterthought. Focus on putting in place policies and secure designs that can be followed through to the implementation process, ensuring that your supplier has done the same and can demonstrate the security mechanisms they have in place. Ensure any deployment has been reviewed by the appropriately skilled security engineers before release into service. Also ensure that the supplier completes regular penetration tests and can supply evidence of the testing. Complement supplier testing by performing your own penetration testing against the service. I have worked with several infrastructure as a service providers who will allow penetration testing against their service, which adds extra confidence that the platform is secure. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Matt, who will talk through some more key areas of cloud security.
Thanks very much, Gareth. So I'm going to pick up on the topic of storage. When you consider that your data is in a multi-tenancy mode, that means you're sharing infrastructure with a lot of other customers of your cloud service supplier, and they may have very different requirements from that service. It becomes very, very important to consider how you'll separate your data from the supplier's other customers. It's actually one of the most common reasons an organisation will cite for not entering into a cloud service. And the reasons for that are fairly evident. The problems around theft of data and the impacts that can incur from there in terms of fines, in terms of reputational damage, or even just down to the basic ability to operate are increasing. Public media does a very good job of expressing when companies mess up. and that blame will always come back to you as the primary brand. The biggest exposure to this particular problem is around public and hybrid cloud services as well, where you're sharing in a multi-tenancy mode. So our recommendations for how you treat this problem are firstly make sure that both you and your supplier understand the data that they're dealing with. So there's a responsibility on you as the buyer to classify your data, either in terms of security classifications in the sort of public or internal or restricted type gradings, or something more descriptive, so financial information or client information or operational information. And this will allow a sort of common understanding of what you expect from your supplier in terms of separation. And then ensure that it's not possible for any user, either on your side or your supplier's side, to access that data without first authenticating. It's important that you keep out anonymous use, and it's very important that you make visible who is accessing it. This will allow you to take an audit trail of why. Next, make sure that when you do transfer or store data, that you're using strong cryptography and secure established protocols such as SSL, TLS, IPsec. These will all be standard terms in any competent service supplier. And make sure that all the encryption keys that are used are within an effective management process, and that you have a role within that management process. It's not sufficient to delegate this all out to your supplier to handle on your behalf. Then make sure that you consider the initial upload in this as well. When you're starting with a new service supplier, it's very typical that you'll have to do some form of bulk migration of existing data into this new supplier. So make sure you treat that with the same level of storage encryption as you would do the live service. And also pay attention to log files as well. Typically when an application is running, they'll record the activities of that application. And without attention being spent, it's quite likely that some of those log files will contain some of your sensitive information. And finally, and probably the most pragmatically in terms of storage, try and keep your obligations to a minimum as well. So only store the data that you need from a business point of view. If you haven't got it, then neither you nor your supplier can lose it. And if you are destroying it after holding it for a short while, make sure you're destroying it securely as well. So pushing delete and putting things into the recycle bin is not sufficient. It's a recoverable action. It's not destruction. And as with all of these treatments, make sure that they're proven regularly by your supplier. Vary the tests that you use on them. In the real world, new threats are created all the time, new vulnerabilities are found all the time, and your test cycle should react to that as well. Our next topic is that privileged user management. So you already manage your own internal privileged users with a high degree of scrutiny, but when you're adopting a new third-party supplier, you'll need a similar level of assurance that your supplier is doing the same thing. After all, these people will have full access to your secure, your sensitive data. So we look at monitoring of these users and logging of these users as being crucial. They have broad access to the information that you consider to be sensitive, and you should aim for exactly the same level of confidence from your supplier as you would do from your own internal staff. And there's a number of techniques that we'd recommend in gaining this confidence. Firstly would be to insist on your supplier doing background checks. There are lots of suppliers that wouldn't see this as part of their overhead. And equally, there's probably a large number of suppliers that would talk to their background checking process, but effectively it's kind of mechanical rather than of high value. So do get under the covers of it and find out exactly what background checks are being done and how effectively. And then make sure that your supplier has got adequate process around new user credentials. So it should be difficult to create a new administrative user. It shouldn't impede your business, but there should be a sufficient scrutiny on how it's done. And that includes deleting users as they become inactive or as they leave. The process that your supplier uses should go end to end. Next, make sure that only users with legitimate needs are given administrative rights. So this comments to the sort of process where users are created in the shadow of their boss. It's not always appropriate that every user logs on in the morning with an administrator right when all they need to do is access email. Also, we'd look to maintain an audit trail of the administrative activities, and this will become more important in a later topic. But it's very, very critical for yourselves to have full confidence that the tasks that your administrators are undertaking are on the basis of an agreed change, and that you've got a trail that you can look back into to check that. And finally, we'd guide that you exercise your right to audit. In all contracts that you establish with any supplier, a very important clause is that of your ability to inspect or appoint other inspectors, such as pen testing, as Gareth mentioned earlier. And we very much advocate using that. It's an important right. You negotiate it for a reason. Next topic is that of investigations. You need to expect that things will go wrong once in a while, or at the very least agree how your supplier can demonstrate they've not gone wrong. And cloud service in all of its forms, whether it's infrastructure or service, they're generally very difficult to investigate from a customer's perspective, and it's very hard to ensure that no illegal activity or misuse is taking place as a supplier. Partly this is down to the efforts prescribed in seminars like this in terms of making the systems more secure. But mostly it's down to the complexity and co-located nature of the infrastructure. They're very distributed, and to tie a particular customer down to a particular box and a particular activity is a complex ask. You should ensure you take legal advice as you go into your contract. Don't define the contract just for the good times and the service that you expect to be delivered, but agree what will happen when things go wrong. Have agreements in place for accountability and individuals who need to be responsible. And agree the responses that you'll want in the event of an incident. So who will do what and how quickly. Our guidance is that if a vendor can't provide such assurances, then the default position is to assume that the support is not available. And if you can't get contractual commitment to support these investigations, along with evidence that the vendor has already done so previously, then it's a safe assumption that investigation and discovery requests would be impossible in your moment of need. You should finally confirm that whatever investigation processes you agree work, and I'd test it along with tests for the monitoring systems that will raise alerts and alarms, such as IDS, IPS, or any other breach notification that your supplier will have. And again, we guide you vary the tests. You've got a changing set of triggers, so this isn't like a fire alarm where you repeat the same test every Friday morning. This brings us to our second poll. And this is the inverse of Gareth's earlier poll. So we're looking to understand if you are using the cloud, what was it that actually pushed you to use it? Whether it was a business risk and you felt a cloud solution would be more assistive. Did you evaluate it in terms of financial benefits? Does it offer functionality that you couldn't get with an internal system? Or is there a regulatory driver behind it where you're better equipped by moving to a cloud service? Or finally, you're not using the cloud. You're one of the few people who answered in the first question that you avoided it through security risks. So if you could make your vote now on this particular poll, and I will pass over to our guest speaker, Mr. Gerry O'Neill from the Cloud Security Alliance.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my purpose in joining this seminar is to give you a little bit of a snapshot, insight into the Cloud Security Alliance, and in particular the UK and Ireland Chapter recently formed. I was going to revisit some of the challenges and perhaps outline the purpose and vision that drives the formation of the CSA and the local chapter. But I'll push through these because I do want to leave some time at the end for anyone who wants to ask any questions. Sorry, it didn't advance. Let me just try that again.
And Gerry, just go ahead and left-click on that presentation and go ahead and use your spacebar then. You should be able to advance that way.
Oh, that's done.
There you go.
No, okay, thank you. So the CSA is around about 2.5 to 3 years now as an organisation. It's member-driven, and its aim is to promote the use of best practice in providing security assurance within cloud computing. Now, clearly, that's one of the big issues with most of those involved in the surveys, and it's one of the big impediments to people getting involved in seizing some of the opportunities. There are currently over 125 corporate and affiliate member organisations, and there are tens of thousands of individual members. There are currently 22 official chapters and 33 more applying around the globe for membership. So it's growing very quickly. The UK and Ireland chapter formed about January of this year, so we've had quite a busy first part year. We're already over 2,000 individual members strong, and we had our inaugural meeting in London in February. And we were involved in the CSA UK Summit. We had a stand at InfoSec Europe in April in London. We're not just London-based. I'm not London-based myself, so I'm very passionate about moving it around the country. We had a Scottish meeting in St Andrews in June. We went back to London in October, a meeting alongside the RSA Summit. But we're planning a Dublin Summit in Q1, probably March of 2012. And we are also at this point forming working groups around some of the initially suggested research topics, trying to advance the cause, advance the knowledge. Our purpose in the UK is to again provide the guidance and tools required to allow both business and home users of cloud services to look at what risks they're running in their business, but also any additional risks that may be related to the use of a cloud supplier and managing those effectively. One of the issues that the global CSA organisation has asked local chapters to identify is any particular local area of specialist interest. And we've chosen risk management as the area which we think is specific to the cloud issue. I think it's fundamental. It's the major focus in building assurance and outlines all of the previous points which both Gareth and Matt outlined in their sort of slides of treatment and so forth. Again, here's a similar survey conducted earlier in the year, and again, primary reasons you're using or planning to use the cloud. I mean, scalability, flexibility of demand for IT infrastructure, possibly reduction of infrastructure costs, maybe reduced staffing and admin costs associated with that as well. So there's a prize there to be had, and the cost management is a very big driver in the current climate. However, so when you then ask the question, well, so what's stopping you? You get the question, oh, well, not so sure about the security thing, or how will it fit with our existing systems, or who owns the data, where will it live? All questions Matt and Gareth have already addressed. Some concerns about performance, governance, and regulatory issues as well. So this is the core area, the core territory where the CSA is working to bring parties together across industries, across governments, between suppliers and clients to try to advance the discussion and build some solid ground in this space. The trust boundaries have moved, and the old approaches will not do. There are no firm boundaries anymore in terms of either physical or network boundaries. And then you've only got to look at consumerization and people with access in the pocket, as it were, to realise that you've got challenges in maintaining where your data is and is being accessed, read, modified, and handled. So there's a need to keep pace with all of these developments and with changes in the definitions of cloud itself. We're looking for some way through the maze of incompatible international legislation and policy. As private clouds spring up, they tend to set their own rules, so we've got issues of non-standardization that we've got to address. There is no real continuous risk management and compliance monitoring, there are emerging solutions in this space. Typically, we've had pen testing at snapshot points in time, but there are now newer services which are affording a continuous monitoring capability. We're looking at those and assessing their capabilities as well. And again, identity management, that could occupy an entire webinar in its own right. So moving through, I think the 5 core areas that the CSA is looking at in building the trust is in the areas of assurance, incident response, identity management, trusted standards, which the CSA is hoping to influence, and I think reinventing the information security industry and the way it does its work. And we have initiatives, dialogue, and research running in all of those areas. One of the areas is also the knowledge, advancing knowledge about what security in the cloud looks like. And if you go on the Cloud Security Alliance global website, you will see version 2.1 of the knowledge guidance. We are currently working on version 3.0, so that in itself says the knowledge itself is moving on in maturity as we speak. And this is a feature of this very dynamic space that things don't stand still. Also on the CSA website, you will see a lot of the research initiatives here, and these have come through other collaborative groups and been brought under the CSA umbrella. So quite a lot of what is happening in cloud is now happening under an umbrella organization, and so they're not seen as competing initiatives. I think this is very helpful in the current market as well. One of those initiatives I've myself been working on, I'm on the steering committee of, is the Common Assurance Maturity Model. You'll see it at the bottom of the screen, CAM. And we started that off, not really cloud-related, but essentially trying to bring assurance into third-party supplier management generally. But it clearly has cloud application, and so has been adopted as a cloud partner project. And if I move to the next slide, this is what the CAM project was trying to do. We had identified 5 domains for assurance around a third-party supplier: their governance, how they run their own due diligence and risk manage their own risks, how they recruit their people in the HR front, what their own site security physically and environmentally is like, how they manage the IT services they depend on to provide you with a service, so the networks, the change management, the service management, and the systems development side, the SDLC stuff. How they handle an incident, because it may end up being your incident as well, and how they manage resilience and business continuity and recovery. So we thought all domains that you would be interested in as a procurer of third-party services. And this is now being modelled with a cloud perspective, a cloud lens, to identify how that works in a cloud supplier environment. So the way ahead really for the CSA and the local chapter is that these challenges are going to remain for quite some time, and the job isn't complete. As I mentioned earlier, the guidance is evolving and changing, and we're looking for updates and new versions coming out all the time. There are already more tools available than you would think, and if you look on the website, you'll realize how much is coming through there. Waiting for some of this to arrive isn't an option. We're advocating people just get involved and identify what options are appropriate to their specific interest in cloud, and to try to, I suppose, influence the agenda. So from the point of view of the UK and Ireland chapter, the website is cloud-security.org.uk, and you'll find a link to click on there. Membership is free. There are not many clubs that are free these days, so but being involved in the discussion and keeping ahead of the curve, I think, is an important objective here. So with that, I'll pass back to Matt to summarise the webinar.
Thanks very much, Gerry. Rather than summarise the presentation material, which we'll make available separately, there's just a couple of other points that I wanted to add on. We've talked in great detail on the sort of security treatments that you can put in place place through your supplier, but one of the most important things that will make a success of any adoption of cloud is actually that internal consideration of what you really need before you go out to market. You can only really make a success of it if you know what you're after. And this applies both functionally, non-functionally, and what your expectations are in terms of costs. It's very easy to get entranced by the lower operational costs of a cloud service when you compare it against internal infrastructure, but it's equally important to consider the transition and integration costs that you'll bear by any move and any externalizing of internal service. And the other thing to bear in mind is that the diligence that you have to apply to all of this is on the grounds that it's your risk continually. You can't turn around in the Sunday papers and blame your service supplier. Your customers won't want to listen to that. On that note, I'll pass back to Gareth.
Thanks, Matt. I just looked through the questions submitted, and there's one in particular stood out, and I believe it's for you, Matt. Where do you see security for the cloud going in the future?
I think you need to look at where cloud itself is going, what are the factors that are going to affect cloud security. The reality is that the security market and the cloud market will respond to these sort of drivers. My view is that more and more of the traditional software vendors, the large sort of applications that are already established in our organisations, will redevelop core products and place them either in a hybrid or a public cloud model. I also think that more and more bring-your-own-device situations will exist in the workplace, and will more than likely find increasing weaknesses in the current encryption mechanisms. There's a lot of talk about breakages to SSL, which is widespread. So we'll see a lot of technical advances around encryption. I think in terms of what this means for risks around portability of data and transport, we'll see new storage and encryption mechanisms and an increased focus on accreditation. So schemes such as Gerry's just described through the CSA will become very dominant. Something like a cycling proficiency badge for cloud providers, I think, will become a necessity at the very least.
Thank you very much, Matt. Unfortunately, we'll have to end our session there, and I really hope you found today's webinar useful. And I want to thank Matt and Gerry for their contributions, and most importantly, you for registering and participating. This is the second in our series of cloud webinars, and we will continue to tailor content based on your feedback. Please keep an eye on our website for future events, and of course you can contact us via email if you want to find out anything more from our cloud experts. Many thanks for attending, and good afternoon.